Millions perished. Entire continents lay in ruins. Adolf Hitler became the symbol of terror, yet his influence extended far beyond the battlefield. But what if the most chilling secrets of the Third Reich have never truly been uncovered? What lies hidden in the tunnels beneath Poland's mountains? What was the fate of the armored train that vanished without a trace? And what became of the treasures, gold, priceless art, and looted artifacts still rumored to be concealed underground? These are among the 13 most haunting discoveries after World War II. The Nazi gold train, a legend shrouded in mystery and obsession. Deep in southern Poland, amid the dense forests and rugged Sudeten mountains, stories persist of a fortified train carrying gold, jewels, stolen art, and other valuables that vanished in the chaotic final days of the Third Reich. In 1945, as German defenses collapsed and disorder reigned, the Nazi high command began moving the treasures they had plundered across Europe. One such shipment was loaded onto a heavily armored train bound for the city of Wrocław, but it never arrived. It disappeared, sparking decades of legend. According to popular accounts, the train may have been diverted into an underground tunnel network built as part of the mysterious eerie project, a massive Nazi engineering endeavor hidden deep in the Alps. Prisoners from concentration camps reportedly dug these tunnels, intended for factories, bunkers, or secret hideaways for regime leaders. Many believe the train was deliberately buried there, never to be recovered. Rumors, vague testimonies, and fragmentary documents kept the story alive for decades. In 2015, 2 treasure hunters using ground-penetrating scanners claimed to have located it. Polish authorities cautiously sanctioned excavations, drawing worldwide media attention. But after months of digging, no train appeared. The signals were geological formations, not treasure. Yet fascination persisted, not for the cargo itself, but for what it symbolized: Nazi greed, obsession with power and art, and the compulsion to erase evidence of its crimes. Skeptics argue the train is myth, born from wartime chaos. But for others, its absence is proof of secrecy rather than non-existence. Today, the Wrocław site continues to attract treasure hunters, historians, and dreamers alike, all chasing the same question: what if it's real? The Enigma machine, the secret language of power. At the heart of the war, where a single message could mean life or death, the Nazis possessed an unprecedented technological advantage: the Enigma encryption device. It became a symbol of German secrecy, nearly impossible to crack until brilliant minds at Bletchley Park, England, managed to break it. Originally created in the 1920s by engineer Arthur Skerbius for secure business communications, Enigma caught the attention of the German military. Its system of rotating rotors scrambled letters with each keystroke, generating trillions of possible combinations. The Nazis trusted it to coordinate troop movements, submarines, aircraft, and counterintelligence operations, confident that their messages were indecipherable. Enter Alan Turing and a team of mathematicians, linguists, and cryptographers. Using captured Enigma machines and ingenious electromechanical devices like the bomb, they systematically unraveled the code. By 1941, they could decode thousands of messages daily, allowing the Allies to anticipate attacks, reroute fleets, and save countless lives. Historians estimate that breaking Enigma shortened the war by up to 2 years. Yet this achievement remained secret for decades, with recognition only arriving long after Turing's death. The Amber Room, a vanished treasure of Tsars and Nazis. Picture a chamber bathed in the golden glow of polished amber panels, mirrors reflecting light as if time had frozen at its peak. Created between 1701 and 1714 by German craftsman Andreas Schluter and Danish amber master Gottfried Wolfram, it was intended for Charlottenburg Palace but later gifted to Peter the Great and installed in Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. Covering over 55 square meters, it contained more than 6 tons of amber, intricate reliefs, gold leaf, marble, and mirrors. During the 1941 German invasion of the USSR, curators attempted to conceal it with wallpaper, but it was discovered and dismantled, transported to Königsberg, now Kaliningrad. The room was exhibited locally before the advancing Red Army. Bombed by the RAF in 1944 and partially destroyed by Soviet troops in 1945, its ultimate fate remains a mystery. Some researchers suggest it was destroyed in the bombing, others claim it was loaded onto ships such as the Wilhelm Gustloff, hidden in mines or tunnels, or even submerged in alpine lakes. Hypotheses abound, including crates sunk in Lake Toplitz. To this day, the Amber Room remains an elusive symbol of lost splendor and wartime intrigue, replica, and hoax theory that the Soviets or even Stalin hid the authentic room by replacing it with replicas before the Nazis looted it. Since the 1950s, archaeologists, treasure hunters, and governments have searched the castle ruins for salt mines, bunkers, and lakes. Radar strategies, surveys, and underground drilling revealed brick rooms beneath former bunkers, but without finding the original room. The lake toplets treasure captured their attention, although no amber panels were ever found. Several researchers involved in the search suffered accidents or mysterious deaths, giving rise to rumors of a curse. According to stories, one researcher died in a car accident. Another was found in a Bavarian forest with suspicious injuries, fueling the belief that anyone who got too close to the room would end up in misfortune. In 1979, the USSR decided to reconstruct the room. Ukrainian using black and white photographed fragments reconstructed using retro-Baroque techniques and raw material from Kaliningrad amber. 90% of the world's amber completed in 2003. It was inaugurated by Putin and Schroeder on the tercentenary of St. Petersburg. The nighttime replica dazzles the visitor but leaves a bitter taste. The original room is still missing. Recovered fragments such as an Italian mosaic in 1997 raised hopes. Other collectors claimed to have panels only to be discredited. Recent investigations in Bavarian mines point to Nazi cover-ups. And modern equipment uses ground-penetrating radar and prospecting. In 2020, a shipwreck, the SS Karlsruhe, was found with crates that could contain remains, but its contents were military, not the room. Today, there is a wide range of theories. The room was destroyed, sunk, buried, stolen, or hidden as a state secret. Russian authorities insisted was destroyed in Koigberg, while hunters continue to search lakes, mines, bunkers, and sunken ships. The room has become a global legend, a symbol of lost art, historical memory, and unsolved mysteries. The Amber Room was not just an imperial treasure. It was the embodiment of dreams, pride, and culture. Its disappearance reveals how banal destruction in the service of ideology can be. The reconstructed room is a tribute, but its original utopia remains hidden in shadows, and as long as someone continues searching with determination, uncovering secrets, perhaps one day that sunset will re-emerge in golden resin from the rubble of history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, echoes of an ancient faith in times of war. On the shores of the Dead Sea, in a harsh desert region of silent beauty, a young Bedouin shepherd from the Tamir tribe threw a stone into a cave, searching for a goat he had lost. The year was 1947. And Palestine, still under British mandate, was simmering with political and religious tensions. But what this young man named Mohammed Edib heard was not a simple bouncing sound on a rock. It was the unmistakable crack of a vessel breaking. Without realizing it, he had initiated one of the most momentous archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Barely 2 years after the end of World War II, the world was still breathing amidst ruins and reconstruction. The war had left deep scars, both physical and spiritual, nations destroyed, entire peoples decimated, and a latent cultural trauma crying out for answers, meaning, and redemption. In this context of global turmoil, the discovery of ancient biblical manuscripts was not simply an archaeological anecdote, but an event charged with philosophical, theological, and even political implications. The manuscripts were discovered in an area known as Qumran, north of the Dead Sea, in what is now the West Bank. There, hidden in a series of 11 caves, lay more than 900 manuscripts and fragments, many of them carefully rolled and stored in clay jars. The texts were written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek and dated to a period between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. Their state of preservation, especially in such a harsh climate, was remarkable. They included copies of biblical texts exegetically, commentaries, monastic rules, liturgical hymns, legal documents, and apocalyptic writings. Among the most striking texts was the complete book of Isaiah, more than 1,000 years older than any other version known until then. Also notable were the Manual of Discipline, which offered a detailed insight into the author's communal life, and the enigmatic Temple Scroll, which minutely described the dimensions and regulations of the ideal temple. Another manuscript known as the Copper Scroll was a list of supposed hidden treasures written not on papyrus or parchment but on thin sheets of beaten copper, suggesting a purpose entirely different from the rest. Who were the authors of these manuscripts? The most widely accepted hypothesis among scholars points to a Jewish sect known as the Assange, an apocalyptic and separatist group who, in disagreement with the official priesthood of the Temple of Jerusalem, retreated to the desert to live a life of purity and spiritual preparation for the imminent arrival of the kingdom of God. This community, possibly composed of no more than a few hundred men, lived an austere life, following strict rules of ritual purity, celibacy, sharing of possessions, and constant prayer. For them, preserving the written word was a form of resistance and holiness. The appearance of these texts coincided with a pivotal moment in the history of the Middle East. The British Mandate was about to end, and in 1948 the birth of the State of Israel would be declared. Archaeology, which already played a political role in legitimizing territorial narratives, were shaken by this discovery. The manuscripts were contested by various actors, Bedouins seeking to sell them, antiquarians like Kondo in Bethlehem, and religious figures like Metropolitan Marathanius, Yeshua Samuel of the Syriac Orthodox Church, and Israeli scholars who subsequently acquired them. Some scrolls were even sold in classified ads in the Wall Street Journal before being purchased by intermediaries in the Hebrew state. It was in the 1950s that systematic efforts to classify, translate, and preserve the scrolls were consolidated. In 1965, the State of Israel inaugurated the Shrine of the Book, a white Jared-shaped building at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem to house the most important manuscripts. The contrast between the dome, the white stone of the sanctuary, and the black stone of the accompanying building represent the duality between light and darkness, between revealed and hidden knowledge. But beyond their religious content or archaeological value, the Dead Sea Scrolls became a powerful symbol. In a world that had just experienced the Holocaust, the destruction of synagogues, the burning of books, and the systematic persecution of an entire culture, these scrolls emerged as ancient witnesses that spoke of another exile, another struggle, another faith that had gone into hiding so as not to perish. The echo of their message transcended the centuries and served as a reminder that spiritual resilience, the need to preserve the word in memory, are impulses as old as humanity itself. Even today, scrolls remain an object of study, controversy, and wonder. New technologies such as multispectral scanning have made it possible to recover invisible letters and reconstruct scattered fragments. At the same time, their legacy raises contemporary questions. Who has the right to safeguard the treasures of the past? Can ancient religious texts offer guidance in a fragmented modern world? Is faith written on parchment a response to the chaos of the present? The Bunker of Fury. The End in the Shadows of Berlin. Beneath the smoldering ruins of Berlin, buried under tons of concrete, steel, and despair, lay the Führer bunker, the last bastion of a doomed regime, like a sarcophagus. There, deep underground, far from the light and judgment of the outside world, Adolf Hitler lived out his final days, surrounded by loyalists, traitors, and the symbolic corpses of a crumbling empire. What began as a pragmatic military construction ended as a claustrophobic theater of the Nazi apocalypse. Initially conceived as part of the Reich Chancellor's bunker complex, its construction was reinforced in 1944 when The threat of Allied bombing became unbearable. Located some 8 m underground and protected by layers of concrete up to 4 m thick, the complex was divided into two main areas: the Vorbunker or Antebunker and the Führerbunker itself, deeper and reserved for the upper echelons. The place had 15 interconnected rooms, all simply furnished with concrete walls and a constant humidity that permeated every corner. But no physical armor could contain the internal decomposition of the Nazi leadership. By April 1945, with the Red Army besieging Berlin and the Western fronts closing in like pincers, Hitler abandoned any pretense of strategic leadership. He took refuge underground with his inner circle: Eva Braun, his longtime partner, Joseph and Magda Goebbels, the fervent guardians of Nazi dogma, Martin Bormann, his inscrutable personal secretary, and other senior officials who preferred to accompany him to the end rather than face the outside world. On the surface, Berlin had become an urban nightmare. Rubble, fires, corpses, and civilians caught between two fires. But in the bunker, denial reigned. Protocol lunches were held. Leaked radio bulletins were listened to, and planning was feigned while reality fragmented. Hitler hunched over, prematurely aged and ravaged by Parkinson's disease. Received officers with useless maps and issued orders that no one obeyed anymore. Imaginary betrayals multiplied. There was a latent paranoia, as if the walls themselves could become enemies. The final madness was sealed on April 29, 1945, when Hitler, in an act disconnected from reality, married Eva Braun in a brief and formal ceremony officiated by a minor party official. A few hours later, he dictated his political testament, blaming the Jews for the war and branding Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler as traitors. The following day, April 30, Hitler and Eva committed suicide in the bunker's living room. He shot himself in the temple with a Walter PPK pistol. She, as she had promised, ingested cyanide. Their bodies were quickly wrapped in blankets, doused with gasoline, and cremated in the Chancellery Garden, following instructions from the dictator himself, who feared the fate that Mussolini had suffered days earlier. But the horror didn't end there. Magda and Isef Goebbels, after unsuccessfully attempting to negotiate a surrender with the Soviets, decided to take their own lives as well. Beforehand, they poisoned their 6 children with cyanide pills while they slept. The final scene was terrifyingly cold. A mother combing her daughter's hair, giving them candy, knowing it would be her last act as a mother. Then both adults went out into the bunker courtyard and committed suicide. Joseph shot himself. Magda ingested poison. Their bodies were also burned, albeit incompletely. When Soviet troops finally took Berlin on May 2, they found the bunker partially destroyed, looted by soldiers, and stripped of all glory. There was no gold, no trophies, no secret technology, only faded dampness, crumbling furniture, and crumpled documents. For the soldiers who descended into that dark underbelly of Nazism, it was like entering the cave of a dead monster. During the Cold War, the site was sealed off by the GDR, German Democratic Republic. And in the 1980s, the visible remains were demolished. With German reunification, the area was rebuilt as a common residential area. Today, the exact spot where the Führerbunker once stood is a parking lot surrounded by modern buildings. A discreet plaque, installed in 2006 after a long public debate, marks the site, but without commemoration or drama. Germany has chosen not to monumentalize the site to prevent it from becoming an object of worship for neo-Nazis or revisionists. However, history cannot be hidden beneath the asphalt. The images, the testimonies, the documents, everything is still there. The Führerbunker remains a symbol of the end of an era of barbarism. It wasn't just a physical refuge. It was an anticipated morale the final act of a tragedy written with fire, steel, and propaganda. In that sealed basement, not only a war ended, but a delirium was extinguished. The echo of the last words of the screams and whispers still seems to resonate between those invisible walls. Because the end of the Third Reich did not occur on a battlefield, but in a damp underground corridor where fear, wounded pride, and denial dug the grave of an ideology that believed itself invincible. In the dead heart of Berlin, the world witnessed the price of blind obedience, absolute fanaticism, and self-consuming fury. The Bad Arson Archives, the written memory of horror. In a small German town called Bad Arolsen, nestled among peaceful hills and quiet streets, lies one of the most haunting documentary repositories of the 20th century. The Arolsen Archive, also known as the International Tracing Service, is a vast collection of more than 30 million documents relating to the victims of Nazism, deportees, enslaved people, murdered people, and missing persons. At first glance, the building complex doesn't suggest the weight of history it holds. But once inside, the atmosphere changes. Endless shelves, worn folders, handwritten letters, typed lists, photographs of faded faces. Everything there whispers of one thing: testimony. These archives were started by the International Red Cross at the end of the war with the urgent goal of helping millions of people reunite with missing relatives. Concentration camp prisoners, forced laborers, children separated from their parents. Many of them vanished without a trace. Arolsen became a beacon for those searching for answers amidst the silence. Over the years, its function changed. What began as a humanitarian effort also became a historical record, a piece of judicial evidence, a tool for remembrance and justice. Documents from Avets, Dau, Buchenwald, transport lists, medical records, death certificates. Each page is a fragment of life and death that refuses to be forgotten. For decades, the archives were not fully accessible for reasons of privacy and diplomatic sensitivities. The contents were restricted. It wasn't until 2007 that they were officially open to the public. Since then, thousands of descendants have been able to reconstruct the fates of their relatives, many for the first time. One of the most powerful aspects of this archive is its human dimension. It's not just about numbers. There are letters from children searching for their parents, reports from survivors recounting what they saw, records of confiscated personal belongings, rings, watches, suitcases. Everything is recorded with brutal precision. Since 2016, a digitization effort has brought part of the archive online, allowing people around the world to access these documents. The work has not only been technical, but also ethical. How to present these horrors without turning them into spectacle. How to educate without hurting, how to honor the victims through reality. Arolsen Archive is neither a museum nor a tomb. It is a bridge between history and memory. A warning written on millions of pages, many stained by the passage of time and others by invisible tears. At a time when denialism and misinformation threaten once again, this archive stands as a documentary barrier against oblivion. As long as these records exist, as long as the echo of the names inscribed there is heard, the horror cannot be repeated without first being remembered. In a world where the truth is often diluted, Bad Arolsen remains a library of memory, one that does not forget. Yamashita's treasure, gold, shadows, and legends in the Philippines. Amidst the dense jungle of Luzon, where the earth bears the marks of conflict and roots are entangled with history, lies a golden legend born of horror, the Yamashita treasure. Halfway between myth, conspiracy, and secret archives, this story begins with an imperial promise of eternal wealth and ends shrouded in dynamite-sealed tunnels, ambitious dictators, and shadows that linger to this day. The name comes from General Tomoyuki Yamashita, nicknamed the Tiger of Malaysia for his swift conquest of Singapore in 1942. But it was in the Philippines toward the end of the war where his legend would merge with that of gold. Appointed Commander-in-Chief in 1944, just as the Japanese Empire was faltering, Yamashita arrived on an archipelago that had become a battlefield. Although there are doubts about his direct involvement, he is credited with overseeing or at least permitting one of the most ambitious plundering operations of the 20th century. According to multiple testimonies and subsequent documents, the Japanese, with the help of collaborators, Asian slaves, and Allied prisoners, transported enormous quantities of gold, jewels, sacred statues, stolen art, and looted relics from countries such as Malaysia, Burma, Indonesia, and Thailand. The objective was simple and brutal: to hide it all in the Philippines, whose strategic location would allow its recovery after a possible Japanese reconquest or as a fund for a future imperial resurgence. The treasures were supposedly buried in hand-dug underground complexes, many of them within natural caves, raised temples, or tunnel systems that had existed since the Spanish colonial era. To ensure absolute secrecy, the access points were blown up and thousands of men perished with them. Slaves, prisoners, and even Japanese soldiers. Testimonies agree on one disturbing detail: the maps were secret, even from the builders themselves. Whoever completed the work never came out alive. After the Japanese surrender in 1945, rumors began to circulate. Many locals spoke of tunnels that vibrated with metallic echoes of captured Japanese soldiers whispering about hidden gold, and of mysterious explosions that sealed invisible entrances. But it was in the 1970s that the myth reached its peak. Thanks to a codename Rogelio Roger Roxas. Roxas, a locksmith and amateur investigator, claimed to have found a cave in Bayo containing a solid gold Buddha over a meter tall and several crates of ingots. According to his testimony, the statue was hollow and contained diamonds. Shortly after his discovery, he claimed that armed men sent by President Ferdinand Marcos confiscated the treasure and arrested him. Years later, Roxas died under suspicious circumstances. But before doing so, he filed a legal complaint. His family launched a legal battle in the United States that culminated in 2005 when a Hawaiian court acknowledged the theft. Although it failed to prove that Marcos kept all the treasure, the scandal sparked a new gold rush. International treasure hunters, former military personnel, amateur archaeologists, and even intelligence services began searching for clues. Some claimed to have found boxes bearing imperial seals. Others said they had recovered jewels of Thai origin. The CIA and other intelligence services, according to leaked documents, reportedly considered the gold as a potential fund for covert operations in Asia during the Cold War. Connections to Swiss banks and money laundering schemes through encrypted accounts that have not yet been fully traced were also revealed. But despite decades of excavations, explosions, thefts, deaths, and sensational documentaries, no one has presented conclusive evidence of the entire treasure's existence. Some believe that much of it was secretly recovered by the U.S. under General Douglas MacArthur and used as part of the Black Eagle Trust to finance the fight against communism. Others maintain that most of the caches remain hidden, protected by geography, superstition, and the silence of the few surviving witnesses. Beyond its possible physical existence, the Yamashita treasure has become a symbol of the brutality of war, of human greed, and of the unsung legacy of Japanese imperialism in Southeast Asia. Each ingot that might be found represents not only wealth, but the price of a vicious occupation where millions of people were enslaved, tortured, and murdered by an empire in free fall. In the humid jungles of the Philippines, even today, farmers dig in silence, motivated by promises passed down from generation to generation. But what they're looking for isn't just gold. It's a way to reconcile with the past, to find meaning among the rubble, to shed light on a chapter that official books still dare not write in full ink. Because if the gold is there underground, then the story isn't over. And if it isn't, Yamashita's legend will remain a warning about the secrets left behind by war, about the silence of the powerful, and about what happens when the glitter of gold overshadows the truth. The USS Indianapolis shipwreck. Silence and sharks. Deep in the dark, vast Pacific lies the corroded skeleton of the USS Indianapolis, a U.S. Navy heavy cruiser whose story became one of the most painful, controversial, and poignant of the entire Second World War. Beyond the sunken metal, this ship carries a collective wound, a bitter lesson about duty, misinformation, negligence, and the terrifying struggle to survive in oblivion. It was 1945. The conflict in the Pacific was reaching its peak and the world was still unaware that it was weeks away from a nuclear explosion. Against this backdrop, the USS Indianapolis CA-35 was given a top-secret mission to transport key parts of the atomic bomb Little Boy, including the enriched uranium core from the San Francisco Naval Base to the island of Tinian in the Marianas. That bomb would be dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, marking a turning point in human history. But the ship that helped change the fate of the war was forgotten by those who were supposed to protect it. After successfully completing her delivery, the USS Indianapolis sailed for later, Philippines, unescorted and unaware that the waters she would be cruising through were actively patrolled by enemy submarines. Critical information about her route was never shared by naval intelligence systems that, had they been, might have warned of the danger. In the early morning of July 30, 1945, the Japanese submarine 158, commanded by Captain Makatsura Hashimoto, detected her in the waters of the Philippine Sea. 2 torpedoes were enough to cause disaster. The first hit her bow directly. The second hit her engine room. In just 12 minutes, the cruiser broke up and sank in the darkness. Of the 1,195 men on board, nearly 900 survived the initial sinking. Thrown into the ocean without adequate provisions, many without life jackets, and with only scattered inflatable rafts. The ship never sent a distress signal. Not a single alert was registered. What followed was one of the most brutal survival odysseys in naval history. For 5 endless days, the castaways drifted under the harsh tropical sun in waters infested with oceanic sharks. Their greatest enemy was not just the sea, but the silence. No one knew they were there. The salt water burned their wounded bodies. Thirst caused delirium. Some drank seawater, which drove them mad. The weakest died of hypothermia during the night or collapsed under the scorching sun during the day. Sharks attacked from below, attracted by blood and movement. Chilling accounts speak of men suddenly pulled underwater, of screams in the night, of bodies devoured in front of their comrades. It was the largest documented shark attack on humans in modern history. The U.S. Navy didn't notice the ship's disappearance. It wasn't until August 2, when Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn, pilot of a Lockheed Ventura aircraft on routine patrol, spotted the survivors, that a rescue operation began. When ships and aircraft finally arrived to rescue them, only 36 men remained alive. More than 870 had died, not from the direct sinking, but from exposure, untreated wounds, dehydration, insanity, and sharks. The impact was devastating. But rather than take responsibility, the Navy blamed the ship's captain, Charles Butler McVeigh III, accusing him of failing to zigzag, an evasive maneuver against submarines, despite traveling in known hazardous conditions and without escort. In a highly controversial trial, he was convicted of negligence, even though the Japanese submarine's own commander, Hashimoto, testified in his defense and stated that nothing would have changed the outcome of the attack. For decades, McVeigh lived with the stigma of guilt, harassed by letters from the families of deceased sailors. Finally, in 1968, unable to bear the pressure any longer, he committed suicide in his garden, clutching his service revolver and a small sailor figurine. It wasn't until 2000 that the U.S. Congress officially exonerated Captain McVeigh, acknowledging that he had been wrongfully held responsible for a string of institutional errors. However, it took the Navy until 2001 to correct its official record. In 2017, more than 70 years after the sinking, an expedition led by Paul Allen, a Microsoft co-founder and philanthropist with a passion for naval history, located the remains of the USS Indianapolis at a depth of more than 5,500 m north of the Celebes Sea. The discovery not only confirmed details of the sinking, but also offered a form of closure, a symbolic grave visible to family members in the nation. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis is more than a military tragedy. It's a dark mirror reflecting the fragility of systems, the brutality of war, the superhuman resilience of human beings, and the cost of silence. It was a story buried, minimized, and for years ignored. But it survived, as did those 316 men to tell its tale? Today, the name of the USS Indianapolis resonates not only as a symbol of sacrifice and service, but as a perennial warning. In war, mistakes are not exacted in ink, but in lives, and sometimes the greatest enemy is not visible, but the silence that devours in the darkness. The Bismarck, the steel colossus that challenged an empire. In the cold and violent waters of the North Atlantic lies a sleeping giant. The Bismarck, the pride of the Germans. Marine, and one of the most formidable warships ever built. Its short but epic story became the stuff of naval legend. A relentless hunt, a colossal battle, and a landmark fall in World War II. The Bismarck was launched in 1939 and from day one was considered a threat to British naval supremacy. Its imposing and avant-garde design included heavy armor, 380mm guns, and unprecedented speed for its size. It was more than a ship. It was a symbol of German power on the high seas, destined to break the British blockade and deal mortal blows to Allied trade routes. Her first combat mission was also her last. In May 1941, the Bismarck sailed accompanied by the cruiser Prince Eugen for an Atlantic raiding operation. The objective to cut vital supply lines for Great Britain. But no sooner had they begun than they were detected. What followed was one of the most famous chases in naval history. In the Denmark Strait, the Bismarck engaged the British battleship HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy. The engagement was brutal and brief. A single broadside from the Bismarck blew the Hood to pieces, killing over 1,400 sailors in a matter of minutes. The United Kingdom was in shock. From that moment on, the order was clear. Sink the Bismarck at all costs. For days, the German ship was pursued by the entire British fleet. Aircraft from aircraft carriers, destroyers, battleships, all in the shadow of the steel monster. Finally, after a torpedo knocked out its rudder, the Bismarck was doomed. In the early hours of May 27, 1941, it was hit by a barrage of fire from the British battleships King George V and Rodney. Damaged, surrounded, and defenseless, the Colossus finally sank, taking more than 2,000 German sailors with it. But the story didn't end there. For decades, the exact location of the wreck remained a mystery. It wasn't until 1989 that underwater explorer Robert Ballard, the same man who discovered the Titanic, located the remains of the Bismarck at a depth of nearly 4,800 m. What he saw was breathtaking. The hull almost intact. The cannons still pointed toward the horizon, the eternal silence of a war that ended at the bottom of the sea. The Bismarck represents more than a feat of naval engineering. It is a reminder of the brutality of war, the obsession with supremacy, and the price paid for military arrogance. Her downfall was not only a strategic Allied victory, but also a founding myth for 20th century naval history. Mouse Tank, the Steel monster that never roared. In the final throes of the Third Reich, when defeat was already inevitable, Adolf Hitler and his engineers began to imagine weapons so powerful they could change the course of the conflict. Thus was born one of the most ambitious, absurd, and fearsome projects of the war: the Panzerwagen 8 Maus. The largest and heaviest tank ever built. Designed by legendary engineer Ferdinand Porsche, the Maus was conceived not just as a tank, but as a mobile fortress. It weighed 188 tons. More than an empty Boeing 747. It was almost 10 m long, and its armor could withstand virtually any anti-tank shell of the time. Its main gun was 128 mm, with a coaxial 75 mm secondary gun. In theory, it could destroy any Allied tank before they could get close enough to counterattack. But that power came at a price. Mobility. The Maus was slow, clumsy, and too heavy to cross ordinary bridges. To move it, solutions were devised, such as fording river bottoms, using snorkels, or constructing special crossings. Fuel consumption was enormous. Its size made it impractical on any terrain other than asphalt or open areas. It was in essence a monster. Too big for real warfare. Only 2 prototypes were built before Germany's collapse. Neither saw combat. One was destroyed by its German operators to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. The other was captured intact by Soviet forces who partially assembled it and studied it closely. Today, that prototype resides in the Kubinka Tank Museum in Russia as a testament to the weapons-fueled madness of Nazism. The Maus represents the pinnacle of a misguided military strategy, that of relying on colossal machines as a magic bullet. While Germany invested resources in this steel leviathan, the Allies produced thousands of versatile and efficient. The result was inevitable. The Maus didn't save the Reich. It didn't win a single battle. It didn't even fire a shot in combat. It was quite simply a symbol of Hitler's megalomania and the disconnect between his war dreams and reality. Yet, its existence continues to fascinate historians, modelers, and military enthusiasts. Its mere conception raises troubling questions. What would have happened if the Maus had been mass-produced? Could it have changed the course of some battles? Or would it have only hastened the downfall of the Reich? Whatever the case, the Maus remains a tank-shaped warning. Bigger isn't always better, and in war, efficiency often trumps excess. The treasure of the SS. Gessopa, silver in the depths. In the vast and treacherous North Atlantic, where waves can reach the height of buildings and the wind cuts skin like a razor, lies one of the most coveted and mysterious secrets of the Second World War. A secret that slept for more than 7 decades in the abysmal darkness of the ocean. The shipwreck of the SSS Gassoper, a modest British merchant ship that unwittingly became an underwater legend. The SS Gassoper was built at the beginning of the 20th century. It was a sturdily built steamship originally intended for trade routes between the British Empire and its colonies. For years, it carried routine cargo, metals, tea, cotton, machinery. But when war broke out in Europe and the oceans became battlefields, nothing remained routine. In 1940, the Gassopa was requisitioned by the British Ministry of Transport like so many other civilian ships and became part of the vast merchant fleet that kept Britain alive amid the Nazi blockade. It was in December of that year that the Gassopa embarked on its most fateful journey. It departed from Kolkata, India, loaded with a mix of goods crucial to the war effort: tea, iron ingots, and something else. Something that would change its history forever. More than 200 tons of silver, equivalent to millions of pounds sterling at the time. Its destination was the port of Gway on the west coast of Ireland, where it was to deliver the cargo to fuel a British economy on the brink of collapse. But the voyage was anything but simple. The Atlantic was infested with German U-boat. The fearsome U-boat lurked like sharks in the fog, waiting for the convoys to disperse. And so it happened. In February 1941, battered by a storm, the Gear became separated from convoy SL-64. Almost out of fuel and alone, it became an easy target. It was then that the U-boat U-101 under the command of Captain Ernst Mangerson located her. With deadly accuracy, he fired a single torpedo. The shell hit the side of the Gear, which immediately began to sink. There was no time for effective transmissions or distress signals. Only one crew member survived of the 85 on board. Officer Richard Ives, who managed to cling to a life raft for 13 days at sea until he was rescued by a British corvette. 4 decades the story of the Gopper remained a half-forgotten tale in the naval archives. It was known that it was carrying silver, that it had been torpedoed, but its exact location remained a mystery. Some said it was near Ireland, others that it had foundered further south. Fact and legend mingled like ocean currents. Everything changed in 2011 when the American company Odyssey Marine Exploration, specializing in high-risk rescues, launched a state-of-the-art search. Using autonomous underwater vehicles and high-resolution sonar scanners, they achieved the unthinkable, finding the remains of the Gearser at a depth of more than 4,700 m. There, largely intact, lay the ship's hull, covered in silt, with its precious cargo still sealed in the holds. The salvage carried out between 2012 and 2013 was a feat of engineering. More than 110 tons of silver, including ingots and coins, were recovered in what is considered the largest recovery of precious metals from a shipwreck. The treasure emerged from the abyss as if time had stood still, protected by the pressure and extreme cold of the ocean floor. But the find was much more than a financial success. It was also a symbolic recovery. Each ingot bore the hallmarks of the British government. Each box spoke of the desperate effort to sustain an empire at war. Each piece of silver bore testimony to the sacrifice of a forgotten crew. The coins, engraved with the date 1940, were time capsules connecting history with memory. Today, the SS Gasopa is considered a war grave, and its story is told in museums, documentaries, and books. It is honored not only as an epic shipwreck, but as a symbol of the logistical struggle behind war, the power of the sea, and the secrets that still lie in the depths. Because in war, not only battles are lost, fortunes are also lost. Many of which, like the Göring, still wait beneath the waves to be rediscovered. 42 attacks. The man who cheated death. Adolf Hitler was without exaggeration one of the most closely watched, protected, and paranoid leaders in history. Yet during his reign, he faced at least 42 documented assassination attempts, ranging from simple improvised attacks to complex plots orchestrated by high-ranking military officials. This chapter not only addresses the staggering number of attempts, but also breaks down some of the most iconic, exploring how and why they failed. One of the earliest and most audacious attacks was the work of Georg Ella, a German carpenter. Convinced that Hitler must die to save Germany, he acted on his own initiative. For months, he infiltrated the Bürgerbräu Calibier Hall in Munich, where Hitler gave his annual speech commemorating the failed 1923 push. Ilzer dug a compartment in the column behind the platform and placed a timed bomb. On November 8, 1939, the bomb exploded as planned, but Hitler had left 13 minutes earlier, cutting short his speech due to weather problems affecting its transport. The blast killed 8 people and injured dozens, but Hitler was unharmed. Elsa was captured and after years of imprisonment, executed in 1945. His solitary, meticulous, and courageous act is remembered today as one of the most serious and technically impressive attempts. Probably the most well-known and elaborate attempt was Operation Valkyrie, led by Colonel Klaus von Tonberg, who, horrified by the regime's atrocities, led a network of army officers determined to kill Hitler and seize control of the government. On July 20, 1944, Stalinberg attended a meeting at Wolf's Lair, Hitler's headquarters in East Prussia. He carried a hidden bomb in his briefcase. He left it under the table and excused himself while the device activated by a chemical detonator counted down the seconds. The explosion was devastating, killing 4 people and injuring many others, but Hitler, protected by the massive frame of the oak table, survived with minor injuries. The failed attempt triggered a wave of reprisals. Stauffenberg was executed that same night and more than 7,000 people were arrested. Some 4,980 were convicted and many executed. It was the last serious attempt from within the army itself. Another curious attempt was that of the young Swiss theology student Maurice Bavot, who decided to assassinate Hitler for ideological and moral reasons. He bought a pistol and traveled to Germany. In November 1938, he stood in the crowd during a parade in Munich, intending to shoot him. However, he couldn't get close enough. Hitler was surrounded by SS soldiers and officers, and the would-be shooter was deterred by the fear of missing and being caught. Bavot was captured days later, executed in 1941 and claimed decades later as a martyr for opposing Nazism. General Henning von Tresckow, another important member of the German internal resistance, participated in multiple plots. In 1943, he prepared a bomb hidden in a crate of liquor and placed it on the plane transporting Hitler from Smolensk. The bomb, which used a British chemical detonator, was intended to detonate in mid-flight, but due to the extreme cold in the plane's hold, the detonator failed to work. Hitler arrived safely in Berlin, unaware of how close he had come to death. Tresckow continued plotting until his suicide in July 1944 following the failure of Operation Valkyrie. Allies such as the United Kingdom and the United States also considered eliminating Hitler. Operation Foxley, devised by the British SOE in 1944, involved assassinating him as he strolled around his Berghof retreat. A sniper would have fired from a high vantage point, but the operation was never carried out, partly because of concerns about the political implications. Killing Hitler, some argued, might prolong the war if his successor consolidated power more effectively. The United States, for its part, had bizarre proposals, such as feminizing Hitler with hormones to destabilize him, or distributing fake leaflets to sow suspicion within his inner circle. None of these plans were carried out. Why did all attempts fail? Hitler's survival has been the subject of debate and speculation. Some attribute it to chance. Others point to the dictator's extreme paranoia, which constantly changed his schedule, limited his contact with the public, and relied only on a small circle. His residences were protected by multiple security rings. Meetings were unpredictable. Attendees were thoroughly screened. Hitler did not use an open car or allow himself to be easily seen in public spaces. Furthermore, the culture of fear in Nazi Germany made plots difficult to organize. The Gestapo informants and the repressive apparatus stifled any attempt at dissent. Many attacks never made it past the planning stage. Although they all failed, the 42 attempts on Hitler's life were not in vain. They revealed that within Germany itself there was resistance. Men and women who did not share his ideology, who were not complicit in the extermination, and who risked and lost their lives for a different future. Klaus von Stauffenberg, Georg Elsa Henning von Tresckow. Today, their names appear on squares, schools, and monuments throughout Germany. They also remind us of a harsh lesson. Sometimes evil survives thanks to indecision, fear, or luck. Hitler wasn't immortal. He was merely the beneficiary of a series of circumstances that kept him alive until he decided to take his own life. On April 30, 1945, in the Berlin bunker, Hitler committed suicide alongside Eva Braun. He died without trial, without being shot, but his regime, his vision, and his empire of hatred collapsed soon after. Of the 42 times death knocked on his door, he only let it in once, and it was too late. But if these 42 failed attempts teach us anything, it's that even in the most brutal regimes, resistance always exists. Not everyone obeyed blindly. Not everyone remained silent. Not everyone was afraid. The story of the conspirators against Hitler is the parallel story of the Germany that was not Nazi, of those who did not chant Heil, of those who knew that the Reich did not bring greatness but devastation. Many of them were ordinary men, carpenters, theologians, low-ranking officers. Others, like von Stauffenberg or von Tresckow, were career soldiers trained to serve the state, but who chose morality over obedience. These men and women defied not only the dictator, but also a system that monitored every gesture, listened to every sigh, and punished every hesitation with exile, prison, or death. In many cases, they knew they wouldn't survive. And yet, they tried. They didn't do it for personal glory. They did it out of conviction. In letters, diaries, and wills, they spoke of dignity, of redemption, of the hope that a different Germany would one day emerge from the rubble. And he did. Decades later, a reunited Germany doesn't hide these chapters. It honors them. In Berlin, a statue commemorates Elsa. In Stuttgart, a school is named after Stalenberg. In Munich, bronze paving stones commemorate those who tried to stop the monster from within. Such symbolic acts are a reminder that memory cannot be buried, not even by fear. Paradoxically, the fact that Hitler died by his own hand without being eliminated by one of his enemies does not diminish the courage of those who attempted it. On the contrary, it elevates their legacy because they were not fighting for personal victory, but for a country that would once again face the world and say, "We too resist." Hitler fell when his empire collapsed from within. When cities were in ashes, the people were starving, and the war machine could no longer sustain itself. He wasn't killed by a bullet, but his end was just as devastating, isolated, betrayed, and cornered by the entire world, including his own people. Thus concludes this chronicle, marking 42 moments where history faltered, but memory did not. Within each of these instances lies the potential for a bolder humanity, one that does not wait for evil to collapse on its own, but rises to confront it, even knowing the cost may be their own survival. Today, these 42 moments stand not as emblems of failure, but as testaments to resilience and as a reminder that it is never too late to act, to speak out, and to stop what must be stopped. The Ghost Army, Art, Deception, and Triumph. In the lesser-known pages of World War II, there exists a story that at first seems pulled from fiction. It contains no medal-wearing heroes or dramatic firefights. Instead, it features paintbrushes, backdrops, pre-recorded sounds, and a cadre of artists, architects, and designers who became soldiers of illusion. This is the account of the Ghost Army, the U.S. 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a unit whose existence remained classified for over 50 years, yet whose impact on the battlefield was as subtle as it was decisive. As armored divisions advanced and front lines burned across Europe, this unusual unit of roughly 1,100 men deployed not with rifles, but with tarps, loudspeakers, inflatable tanks, and radio transmitters. Their mission was singular: to deceive the enemy. Their specialty, the art of illusion. Entire feints could be staged within hours, simulating the presence of a full division, complete with barracks, vehicles, artillery, and the activity of troops. Their tanks were made of rubber, their aircraft of canvas. Positioned strategically, these decoys diverted enemy focus from the genuine Allied movements. Yet their deception did not end with visuals. Using powerful loudspeakers mounted on trucks, they recreated the sounds of marching soldiers, revving engines, and loading artillery. The auditory illusion reinforced the visual ruse. To further enhance the subterfuge, radio deception was employed. Skilled operators transmitted fabricated messages that mirrored authentic communication patterns, convincing German interceptors that they were listening to real units. During operations like Normandy, where surprise was essential, the Ghost Army misled German command about the actual landing sites. Later, in the Battle of the Rhine, they simulated the movement of entire divisions at false crossing points, allowing real troops to advance elsewhere unopposed. Each operation executed by this unit potentially saved hundreds, even thousands, of lives. Despite their bravery, their feats remained hidden for decades. The 23rd Headquarters soldiers carried no weapons, yet risked their lives behind enemy lines, wielding only creativity and keen battlefield insight as their arsenal.